such a good friend.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. We'll go ahead and get started. Okay, now that I just told you to take your seats, how about we stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to start us off right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take your seats. Good morning and welcome to the 2015 AFCEA Cyber Symposium. I am Dean Hullings. I'm going to be your Master of Ceremonies today. I've been the program chair throughout the planning cycle. So I'll be your Master of Ceremonies today, and I will also be part of the program for the next couple days. So you'll see a lot of me. If you have any questions about what's going on, go ahead and come ask me. But right now, to start us off, I would like to introduce our chapter president, Mr. Bob Wright.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm naturally an optimistic person by nature, so welcome to sunny and balmy southern Colorado, especially for those of you who managed to make it from the East Coast. 6,000 flights canceled. Some of you made it. We're grateful that you're here. I want to make sure that I say up front, thanks to all our volunteers. We have about 200 volunteers that help put this together every year. Let's give them a round of applause. The other thanks I want to give is to all the industry participants, both the sponsors, the exhibitors, and registrants. Without your support, we couldn't do any of the things we want to do in terms of providing scholarship money to deserving high school kids, teachers, and enlisted airmen all over the United States Air Force. The local Rocky Mountain chapter has a very strong desire to continue our legacy of raising funds and giving away funds every year. This is going to be a great event this year. You're helping us achieve our goals. I want to talk just very quickly about today. It's a three-part symposium this time. Today, we're going to be honored to have Mark Weatherford kick off this morning with a keynote address. At lunchtime, I hope you're all around. We have a great luncheon keynote speaker from Lieutenant General Ronnie Hawkins, and we're also going to give out the North American IT Leadership Award at lunch today. And finally, I want to invite everybody to the Wounded Warrior Project that we have this evening from 7:30 till 10 o'clock. In your programs, that Wounded Warrior event says it's going to be in the Lakeside Terrace over in the Broadmoor, Maine. It has been changed. The demand was overwhelming, so we're going to move it over to the Broadmoor International Center, which is right around the corner out the door to the left over by the Golden Bee. And we hope you all can make it. This is a joint event that helps to benefit the Air Force Association's Wounded Airmen program and also the Mount Carmel Center of Excellence, which helps wounded warriors in recovery and transition. So thank you all for coming. We have a great program for the next 2.5 days. Appreciate all your support, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Chris Beasley to talk about some specifics on today's agenda and the rest of the week. Chris?
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Bob said, I'm Chris Beasley, the chairman of the 2015 Cyber Symposium. And on behalf of the chapter and on behalf of all the wonderful citizens of this great region, welcome. This is the 18th symposium and the 13th here at the Broadmoor. And we think that it's a great symposium from the content, and we think it's a great place to have it, and we hope that you think so too. Our theme this year is protecting cyberspace, policy, partnerships, and practical solutions. And we have a great mix of interesting and thought-provoking speakers and panels. Over the next 3 days, majority of them will be here, and then for those of you that received an invitation to the classified session that wanted to, we'll have some over there as well at Site Tour. We also, in our Microsoft exhibit hall, have over 100 booths from over 90 companies. And so we highly encourage you to go in there and learn about all the great cutting-edge things in the cyber business. Whether you're an individual attendee, a sponsor, an exhibitor, a speaker, or one of our countless volunteers, we think you're going to find this is a great symposium this year. You have a chance to have some interesting discussions, to meet some old friends, to have an opportunity to do a little business, and of course, you're in an awe-inspiring setting here on the edge of the Rockies. This year, for the first time, we added a training session on Monday, and we think it went very well, and we're really excited by the fact that our sponsor, Route 9B, could put on some really high-tech cyber classes, and so we're already starting to plan next year's training and see how we can do it even better. This year, we also added, as Bob Wright said, a classified session, and we had 650 people apply for 200 slots. So it was so bad, even the guy who organized it didn't get a slot. So if you didn't get one, and we apologize for the 200 that did, thank you for joining us on Thursday over at Site Tour for the classified session. And next year, for those that didn't, please sign up early. We started 18 years ago with two simple goals. The first is to have a world-class symposium where our industry and government people can talk together about the challenges of cybersecurity, community cyber readiness, and national defense. The second reason that we do this, and we go to so much time and effort to organize a symposium, is very simple. Because all of you, whether you're a sponsor, an exhibitor, or an attendee, help us raise money for STEM education and for the Wounded Warrior benefits. This is the 18th year I mentioned. Last year, we gave out over $100,000 in STEM scholarships to high school seniors and enlisted folks. And we also had teacher STEM grants, and that totaled over $100,000. Over the last 18 years, we have given out more than $1.1 million in scholarships. And through the association with the Wounded Warrior Benefit, we help raise money for two fantastic charities that support those who have been wounded in the cause of freedom. So we thank you very much for contributing to this effort, both on the intellectual side and to help us raise that money. There's a huge number of people it took to put this on, and we want to thank them today. First off, we have all of our sponsors, and we will recognize them Wednesday at the luncheon. We'll bring them up and formally recognize them, but we want to say thanks to all of them today. We also have all of our exhibitors who are in the exhibit hall, and you'll have a chance over the next 2.5 days to see them and visit them. And without them, there'd be no exhibit hall, and more importantly, no cool swag. So make sure you get all the good swag. I saw a cool dongle that gives you various adapters for your phones, so grab one of those. We'd also like to thank all of you, because without you, this hall would be empty, and we would have no symposium. So please join me in a round of applause for sponsors, exhibitors, and for all of you. Thank you. I also want to thank a special group of folks, our committee, and all of our volunteer workforce. As far as we know, this is the only symposium of this size put on around the country by an all-volunteer committee. The committee's been working on this for 11.5 months, and we are really tired. We're ready to have this thing and get it going. I'd like to especially thank the committee leads, and I'm going to just name them now. Dean Hollings, who was already up here, Vanessa Johnson, Bob White, George Berrig, Steve Wyndham, Wanda Williams, Jerry Roush, Dana Morgan, Tina Harvey, Scott Randall, Joan Janoff, Janine Platt, Mike Kuhn, Steve Struble, Shriek Mantravati, and Dusty Burleson. So those are the folks that were the leads. We have many other committee folks, and if you look at page 2 of your program, you'll see the list of everybody. We also have over 200 volunteers just this week here doing security and registration and the thousands of other tasks it takes to put on the symposium. So please join me in a round of applause for our committee and for all of our volunteers. All right, and I know you're here really to see Mr. Weatherford, so I will get right to that. But first, I have a couple of quick admin remarks. First, if there's an emergency, please exit through any of the emergency doors, go across the streets, and then wait for the Broadmoor staff or one of our security staff to give you further directions. Secondly, we have a great mobile app, and we highly encourage you to download that. There's signs out front that give you a QR code, or you can just go to the Apple Store, the Google Store, the Microsoft Store. We have it for all three mobile platforms. On there, you'll find exhibitors, the schedule, the bios, surveys, everything you'd want. And to entice you to go and get that app, if you go on the homepage of the app, there's a contest button. If you click on that, you can sign up for the contest. And tomorrow morning and mid-morning, we're going to give out an iPad Mini 3 to one lucky winner. So I highly encourage you to download the app and join the contest and use the app. Third, we'd like your feedback. Through the app or through our website, you can go to our surveys for every forum and for the overall symposium itself. And we highly encourage you to do that. We learn from what you have to say, and we make it better next year. So please do that. Lastly, for those that are in the secure session on Thursday, if you haven't done so already, please go out sometime in the next day or day and a half to the desk that's just across from the registration desks. We need to know if you're going to take the bus to Scitor or if you're going to drive yourself. If you're going to drive, we need to give you a map. So please do that. If you've been invited to the classified session, you should know that. And lastly, 2016, 1 year from now, we'll have a training day on the 1st of February. We'll have the symposium on the 2nd through the 4th, right back here at the Broadmoor, and we'd love to see you in 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2015 Cyberspace Symposium. We're going to have a great week. And with that, I'd like to introduce Cadet Third Class Everett Montano to introduce our speaker. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Cadet Third Class Everett Montano. My major at the Air Force Academy is computer engineering, and my hopes are to either be a cyberspace officer or be a pilot or cross-commissioned Army. I'm not really sure at this point what I want to do, but the first speaker for the morning is Mr. Mark Weatherford. Mr. Mark Weatherford is a principal at the Chertoff Group, a premier global advisory firm that focuses specifically on security and risk management. Prior to his current position, Mr. Weatherford served as the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Undersecretary for Cybersecurity. Just as notable, Mr. Weatherford was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger to be California's first Chief Information Security Officer, a job that he did just before an early part of his career here in Colorado. Mr. Weatherford was named one of the 10 most influential people in government information security by GovInfoSecurity in both 2012 and 2013. Please give a warm, excited, enthusiastic welcome to Mr. Mark Weatherford.
I asked him to play the Ramones when I came up, but they couldn't find it. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you for being in Colorado. I did about 5 years exile in Washington, D.C. and moved back to Colorado last year. And I can tell you it warms my heart to wake up and look at Pikes Peak every morning. It also warms my heart to meet young men like Everett. He's on the Air Force cybersecurity competition team. And it was one of the programs that I ran at DHS was the Collegiate Cybersecurity Challenge. And the Air Force has done very, very well in that competition, the national competition among universities around the country every year. So I've been in the cybersecurity business for a long time. and I still find it both exciting and a little bit terrifying every single day. I did my graduate thesis on information security way back in the Stone Ages, 1994, and I did a thesis on information security. At the time, no one knew what the heck I was writing about, which was kind of good. Those of you that have written a thesis, you know, if you know more than your advisor about your thesis, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff. So, but anyway, at the time, it was rather unique, but I was one of those, I guess, rare and lucky people that got to spend the rest of my career in the Navy working in my career field, doing my payback after payback after payback in the cybersecurity arena. In fact, I was getting ready to retire from the Navy in 1999. I was in Pensacola, Florida, and I got that call from your detailer. Anyone ever get that call from your detailer? He says, Mark, I need you to pack your bags. I need one more tour out of you. And at the time, I was obviously not real happy about that, but like many things in life, it ended up being probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I left Pensacola and I went up to Norfolk, Virginia to the Fleet Information Warfare Center, and I ran the Navy's Computer Network Defense Operations and the Navy Computer Incident Response Team. This was way in the early days when things were just getting hot. I mean, we're right literally in the middle of Moonlight Maze. Some of you remember Moonlight Maze. The I Love You virus, the Melissa virus, Code Red, all of this stuff was happening during my tour at NAVCERT in Norfolk. So it was a great way to end up my Navy career running this kind of operations. And my biggest headaches those days, really though, beside those other big events, were worrying about website defacements. The very first thing I did every morning when I got to work is I would get a report from my folks and said, okay, you got to call JTF-CND and report all of these Navy commands that have had their website defaced over the evening. And you know, it was every single day. And I think back on those halcyon days and wishes that was all we had to worry about today. Today, I'm a consultant in the private sector, and I spend most of my time really in two ways. I'm either helping security technology companies figure out how to break into new markets and brand themselves. I work with a lot of startup companies in Silicon Valley. Or I'm working with companies to help them elevate their security game, either pre-breach or pre-security event, which is better, or post-event, which is not so better. But a lot has happened in the past 15 years, and I'm going to take a little different tack today because you're going to hear a lot about a lot of different cybersecurity related things today. But I'm not going to talk about how the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans are having their way with the United States every day. I'm not going to talk about the White House and Capitol Hill are not doing that they should be doing. And I'm not going to talk about why security products still ship with vulnerabilities that should make some major technology vendors weep with embarrassment every day. I'd love to talk about those things, but I do think you're going to get plenty of that over the next day or two. Breaking news, not breaking news, but yesterday the president put out his FY16 budget. Probably like many of you, I get alerts for different kinds of things, and I bet I got 20 different media alerts yesterday related to cybersecurity and budget. Everybody in Washington, D.C., every government organization, including DOD, is using cybersecurity as the catalyst for all kinds of new funding requests. DHS is spending asked for $487 million for the Einstein program. They've asked for $104 million for the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation program. NIST is hoping to be a $1 billion organization this next year. It's just kind of interesting that those of us that have been in this security business for a long time, sometimes we felt like we were howling into the wind, asking for funding and for resources to do what we knew was right and what we knew was important. And I guess, you know, the events of the world have happened and have changed so much over the past couple of years that we're finally starting to get all of that attention that we've been begging for over the years. So the focus of my remarks today, is going to be on the Internet of Things. Most of you have probably heard it, but I still talk to people every now and then and say, what is this Internet of Things? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's simply the intelligent connection of people, processes, data, and things. And we're at an incredible period of time in the technology world, and the Internet of Things is speeding us along on a road where there aren't any guardrails. In fact, I'd say, and I don't have any data to prove this, that the trend with the Internet of Things is moving at a higher velocity than anything in history. 7.37 billion. That's the number of mobile devices in the world as of yesterday afternoon. There's actually a website that tracks mobile devices connecting. This was at about 3:44 yesterday afternoon. It's also more people than there are in the world. We passed that in October of last year. There's more mobile devices connecting to the internet today than there are people in the world. Managing all the data, can you go back, please? Managing all the data that being produced by these devices, the smart cars, military components, smartphones, industrial components, smartwatches, and home appliances that are recording and transmitting information 24/7 by 365. And this is a challenge that we haven't even begun to figure out yet. And since we're generating all of this data, how do we actually get value out of it? A lot of smart people and a lot of companies are working very hard to try to figure that out. It's like evolution, if you believe in evolution, Darwinian evolution. The systems and software necessary to make sense out of the data are like the first organisms climbing out of the primordial ooze. There's great promise there, but there's also great danger. We haven't begun to understand the value and the risks associated with so much personal and potentially sensitive information floating around with people accessing it, many of them who, if we knew that they were accessing it, we probably wouldn't want that. We probably wouldn't authorize that. The Internet of Things subject is important, and while there are more questions than answers, it deserves our attention. It deserves our attention because most of us are going to live long enough that it will become part of our lives. In less than a generation, we've become almost completely dependent in some form or fashion on the internet and what it can do for us in our daily lives. It's become the technology equivalent of a security blanket. And if you think I overstate that, think about the last time you lost your internet service. If you were at work, you probably closed up your computer, picked up your gym bag, and walked out the door, because there's really not a whole lot you can do without that. In the next decade, I predict we'll become completely dependent upon the Internet of Things. I wonder how we ever lived without it. Any Isaac Asimov fans here? Couple, good. If you read Asimov, and if you haven't, you should, but if you've read Asimov, you know that he was almost supernatural in his vision. He started writing science fiction back in the 40s, and you can open one of his books today, and it's like you could change the date on it, and you could almost put yourself in the book. Some of the things he was writing about have come to pass that way. One of my favorite Asimov quotes is, "No sensible decision can be made any longer without taking account not only the world as it is, but the world as it will be." This is important not because it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. The Internet of Things is here. It doesn't matter if you agree with the revolution it's going to have on the military and the way we fight, or the advantages it's going to give our opponents. The Internet of Things is here. It doesn't matter if you think it's going to impact your personal privacy and the privacy of your family. The Internet of Things is here. It doesn't even matter if you think we're too out and far in front of our ability to secure the Internet of Things. It's here. It's already impacting our lives on a daily basis, and it's going to eventually impact the lives of every human being alive. Just like evolution from steam to electric power, the Internet of Things is inevitable and it's irreversible. Google, IBM, Intel, Qualcomm, and hundreds of other companies are hustling to take advantage of the turbulence brought about by the Internet of Things. because the strategic thinkers and visionaries among them see the huge opportunities it provides to society. John Chambers said last year, if you look back a decade from today at the impact on the Internet of Everything, I predict you'll see it'll be 5 to 10 times more impactful than the whole Internet has been. Think about that. That is a profound statement when you think about the impact the Internet has had. So what is the Internet of Things? Some of you have probably already noticed I'm using the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything interchangeably, and that's not correct. But until we, this is the terminology is still evolving as well. But I want to lay out the distinctions because they are kind of important. The Internet of Things refers to the interconnections of devices, of computing devices across the Internet, and includes the components, everything, all the components that, that make that up. The Internet of Everything includes the networks that support the connections of all of these devices. And then the industrial Internet is General Electric's term that refers to the integration of physical machinery and network sensors. For today, I'm just going to keep simple. I'm going to talk about the Internet of Things and just make that mental translation in your brain that while there are distinctions, I think for a conversation, you can use one term like that. Basically, though, I think of it as anything that can be connected will be connected. I read somewhere that it means anything with an ON/OFF switch. And that's probably not accurate either because there's a lot of things that don't have an OFF switch. They're just on all the time, cranking out information. IBM discusses this from the perspective of the world's systems and industries becoming more instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent. Instrumented because information is captured wherever it exists, such as through the use of remote sensors. And there are more and more of them. Interconnected because information is moved from wherever it's collected to wherever it can be consumed. And finally, intelligent because information that is processed, analyzed, and acted upon can be used to derive greater knowledge and value. The Internet of Things allows for an almost endless number of opportunities to connect things together, and I don't think we can even conceptualize the impact it's going to have on the world. Gartner says there will be over 26 billion devices connected to the Internet of Things by 2020. They may be right, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball there, but I don't think anybody really has this idea. There's different reports that come out every week that number changes and moves it around. In fact, if you remember that 2.37 billion number I showed earlier, I checked that same number 2 hours later yesterday afternoon, and it was 123,000 devices more than it was 2 hours previously. This number is changing so rapidly that we can't even keep track of it. John Chambers says the Internet of Everything could be worth $14.4 trillion in revenue and another $4.6 trillion in savings to industry and government. $19 trillion. That is an unbelievable number associated with technology. Of course, Cisco's gone all in on the Internet of Things, so you would certainly expect the CEO to say that. But the Internet of Things is creating an entirely new economy. In the old economy, traditional manufacturers and producers competed against other companies who made similar kinds of things in the similar kinds of sectors. In the new economy, everyone will be competing with everyone else, and being able to create new value for customers is going to determine success or failure. The Internet of Things revolution is a result of an explosion of inexpensive sensors, smaller processors, and virtually unlimited storage due to the dramatic evolution of cloud computing and the colossal leaps in the advancement of wireless technologies. Greg O'Connor is the CEO of a little company called AppZero, and he's coined this new term that he calls Bezos' Law, named obviously after Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. Bezos' Law is basically a 2014 analog to Moore's Law, which those of you probably remember was coined by Gordon Moore back in 1965, and simply says that the number of transistors on on an integrated circuit doubles every 18 months to 2 years. Bezos' law says this: over the history of cloud computing, a unit of computing power price is reduced by 50% approximately every 3 years. That's a pretty big number. It's also why the Internet of Things is on such a fast train. In the industrial internet world, the Internet of Things means new opportunities for predictive maintenance where sensors are part of the plant or facility infrastructure and where they monitor 24/7 by forever the conditions of systems and equipment. Remember, in the industrial world, sometimes they turn these systems on and they never turn them off. They run forever. They run until they break. This means that maintenance can be initiated when it's needed and not on some predetermined schedule that may or not be accurate. This always reminds me, back in my early Navy days, I was actually a technician working on teletypes and computers, but we had these preventative maintenance schedules. And every month we had to go do certain things to certain types of equipment. And I always thought, this thing hasn't even been turned on in the past month, but yet we got to do the same kind of maintenance on it. And I think the Internet of Things is going to change the way we do that kind of maintenance. So I want to go through a few examples of the value governments, organizations, and people are seeing as a result of the Internet of Things. Barcelona is Spain's second largest city with over 1.6 million people. They're saving $58 million a year through the use of smart water technology. They've increased parking fee revenues by $50 million, and they've created over 47,000 jobs through their smart city efforts. The amount of municipal solid waste generated around the world is expected to reach 2.2 billion tons annually by 2025. That's almost double the amount in 2012, and the cost is about $375 billion per year. By changing the traffic patterns of garbage trucks and installing sensors in garbage cans to identify when they're full and need to be picked up, U.S. cities alone can save over $10 billion in waste management costs. Marco Annunziata is the chief economist at General Electric. He's a chief economist, but he's a really smart guy on technology as well. Marco describes how the industrial internet will impact the aviation industry, where today, unscheduled maintenance events are responsible for about 10% of all flight cancellations and delays. These cancellation and delays cost the global airline industry about $8 billion every year. They also cost us, you and me, a lot of inconvenience and heartbreak. Marco talks about aircraft preventative maintenance systems that are self-learning and able to predict issues that a human operator may never see. These preventative maintenance systems allow airplanes while in flight to communicate with technicians on the ground so that when the plane lands, the technicians already know what's wrong, what needs attention. In the US alone, a system like this can prevent over 60,000 delays and cancellations every year. For those of you that travel a lot, I would appreciate that a lot. Streetlights. 1/3 of the world used technology from the 1960s. Updating this technology with networked motion detection LED lights can save 70–80% in management and operational costs alone and help reduce crime, including car thefts, assaults, and even burglary. Nice, France expects their streetlight initiative to decrease the city's energy bill by more than $8 million this year. The Internet of Things is also changing the face of education by allowing a student in Bangalore or Melbourne, or you name the city in the country, to attend a lecture at Stanford, the Air Force Academy, at Harvard, in real time and contribute in real time. Of course, to be able to do that is dependent upon the connections and the services that's going to be provided by the Internet of Things. The Withings Smart Body Analyzer is a Wi-Fi-enabled bathroom scale that recognizes who you are, measures your weight, your body composition, and your heart rate, and then sends that information to your smartphone, or your doctor, or your insurance company, or perhaps your neighbor, if you're not safe about it. The Apple Watch, which hasn't been released yet, is coming out, I think, in the next month or so. The Apple Watch will know who you are, where you are, what you're doing there's accelerometers and gyroscopes inside it, can tell what you're doing, health information about you, and perhaps even be able to check your mood. That's a little bit too much information for me to be wearing around on my wrist, I think. Union Pacific Railroad uses infrared thermometers, microphones, and ultrasound scanners and sensors along railroad tracks to scan trains as they pass. Those sensors then send readings to the railroad data centers where they can determine equipment that is degraded or at the risk of failing. Marco Annunziato, who I mentioned earlier, he also describes the healthcare industry where hospitals that have deployed industrial internet technology to electronically monitor and connect patients, staff, and medical equipment have reduced bed turnaround times by nearly an hour. That may sound like not that big of a deal, trivial, but when you're a patient and you need care, an hour means a lot. That 1 hour also means significant economic benefits, since a simple 1% reduction in those basic inefficiencies could result in savings of over $60 billion to the healthcare industry worldwide every year. Those are some of the great things we can expect about the Internet of Things. What's the downside? Many of us have been expressing concern about the loss of privacy on the Internet for several years now. This is something Josh Corman calls the perfect surveillance machine. Unfortunately, Mr. Snowden and his turn to the dark side a couple of years ago hasn't helped in our getting the message right on this. The Internet of Things is creating a much greater problem for privacy because of all the new nodes, points, and devices that collect and transmit our personal data, often without us even being aware of it. I got a new Garmin XT920 for Christmas, and I'd been wearing it for a couple days, and of course I didn't read the directions. I just set the time and put it on. And all of a sudden this thing started buzzing. And I look and I see it's actually connected via Bluetooth to my cell phone, and my email is coming up on my watch. I didn't even know it could happen. Kind of scary. I wonder who else is monitoring my watch. I'll talk to that in a minute. So these nodes and endpoints and devices are generating very accurate and sensitive data that have the potential to create disturbingly personal profiles. Remember this Target's pregnancy prediction score? This was kind of in the media about 2 years ago. Using retail transaction data, Target was able to calculate both whether a consumer was pregnant, but also when she was due, just by her shopping habits. They then used that information to offer coupons to expecting moms. Now, of course, the reason this got media attention was some guy started getting his mail, and his daughter was getting coupons from Target for pregnancy-related stuff. You know the rest of that story. Hewlett-Packard released its Internet of Things State of the Union study last July, which showed that 8 of the 10 devices they tested raised privacy concerns regarding the collection of consumer data, such as name, email address, home address, date of birth, credit card credentials, and health information. And this slide shows all of the other different connections, and the sharing of information that you're doing every single day, whether you know it or not. And all of this in spite of the numerous regulations, restrictions, and compliance standards that require PII to be protected. We've got to get better at developing products and getting in front of this. Or I think we're going to have a legislative overreaction, which is starting to see a little bit. Some of you may have heard that the FTC released a pretty significant report last week. And the FCC is the de facto privacy regulator for the US government, so it's kind of a big deal. The FTC report highlights that while the IoT, the Internet of Things, has a potential to make daily life more convenient, this new ecosystem of connected devices is also collecting vast amounts of personal information that raise new privacy and data security questions. The report also supports tougher data breach notification laws and expansive privacy legislation. And Congress is poised to act. Over the last 4 years in the 112th and 113th Congress, they generated over 100 different pieces of legislation with either a cybersecurity component or a privacy component to it. Now, I won't say, well, 3 of those pieces of legislation passed. They passed on December 28th of 2014. Kind of got in under the line. And they were, while they were important from an optics perspective, they weren't that significant from a legislative perspective. Of course, now we have the Sony event that happened in December, which has created a whole new firestorm of activity and CEO perp walks on Capitol Hill. And one of my pet peeves in working with the legislator is they get such great joy out of bringing a CEO to Capitol Hill to chastise him, when in fact they had done nothing to prevent that over the last 3 or 4 years. Anyway, there are 6 pieces of legislation already working their way through the Hill right now. And that's important because Congress has only been back in session for 4 weeks. So I do think that we're going to see some legislation this year, and hopefully it'll be good legislation and not legislation with unintended consequences. But the point is that we need to be addressing privacy and security now while the Internet of Things is still in its infancy. So thinking about this vast new Internet of Things arena, where does security fit in? Security as opposed to privacy. My friend Steve Chabinsky, some of you probably know Steve, he's a retired FBI guy. He works for a security company now. But Steve wrote a paper in 2010. The paper was awesome in itself, but this quote here is, I use this all the time, and it's necessary to consider whether the rapid adoption of the internet has provided so considerable an asymmetric advantage to our adversaries that can change the course of American history. That quote was accurate in 2010, and it's accurate in 2015. And if you remember the John Chambers quote earlier about $19 trillion, when you're talking about money with that many zeros behind it, you can rest assured that the bad guys notice that too, and they're following that trail of money. It means our cybersecurity and privacy problems are almost certainly going to get worse before they get better. All these Internet of Things devices and always-on connections, which are simply new Wi-Fi hotspots in reality, are they simply too lucrative for criminals to ignore? The question about whether or not we're facing active threats from sophisticated adversaries is no longer an academic issue. We are. Most of you know that. The Hewlett-Packard report I mentioned earlier showed that 70% of the most common Internet of Things devices contains vulnerabilities. My friend Rod Beckstrom, former CEO of ICANN, he coined his own Beckstrom's Law, and I'm really annoyed by this because I was saying the same thing, but he actually published it, so I have to give him credit for it, even though I said it before he did. If it's connected to the internet, it's hackable. Everything is being connected to the internet, therefore everything is hackable. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic about this, but while providing great value, connecting everything together in this Internet of Things world is serious business, and the vulnerabilities complicate the nature of our cybersecurity challenges. Most of you have heard of Patch Tuesday, that day every month when Microsoft releases its patches for their applications and vulnerabilities that have been discovered over the past 30 days. Patch Tuesday doesn't seem like a very good idea when you're needing to patch an insulin pump or a Boeing 787 or a pacemaker or a utility substation, or pick your product. Barnaby Jack was a security researcher. He actually died a couple of years, but he was at Black Hat Conference 4 years ago, and he demonstrated that due to vulnerabilities in the programming of a wireless transmitter, probably much like this, used to give instructions to a pacemaker, he was able to remotely cause the pacemaker to deliver an 830-volt shock. That's a pretty bad day for somebody. Black Hat and DEF CON, many of you probably go to the conferences in Las Vegas every year in the end of July and August. They've really been a dream for hackers over the past couple of years with respect to the Internet of Things, as new vulnerabilities are released for cars and airplanes and healthcare devices. This is a graph of stock price of Medtronic, who made the insulin pump that was hacked at Black Hat. You can see there on August 1st, which is the day that they did the demonstration at Black Hat, the stock took a pretty steep nosedive. That, while it did recover, that's the significance these kinds of things can have on the economy. Scott Irvin's a CIO at a large hospital in the Northeast. Said they went through and tested all the different devices in their hospital, and they were able to compromise the credentials or capture the credentials of almost every single device in the hospital. Some of you know Billy Rios and Terry McCorkle, they're security researchers. They went in and they started looking at some of these different pacemakers, defibrillators, and other medical device technologies. And they decided they were going to put the spreadsheet together to just keep track of all the passwords. They stopped keeping track. They said they capture the passwords of every single device they went after. These are devices that are just putting passwords across the open wires. Cars. If anybody's bought a car in the past 2 or 3 years, you realize the connectivity that goes along with that car. I mean, your car is a mobile wireless machine. There is so much mobile connectivity coming in and out of your car. It's absolutely astonishing. Probably you might be able to see it there. There's a website there, informationisbeautiful.net. It's a great website for all kinds of good data, by the way. But they have I'd put it on a slide, but it's too big. They have a chart that lists the lines of code in a variety of different devices. And the one that struck me, and there's just hundreds of them. Of course, does anybody have a guess on what the biggest application in the world is, the most lines of code in any application in the world? Obamacare. But two that stuck out to me, the Chevy Volt has more lines of code than the F-22 Raptor. That's pretty unbelievable, a car that's driving around the street that has so much. And any of you that have written code knows that despite our best intentions, some of our code is going to have vulnerabilities in it. And when you think, this Steve McConnell, he wrote this book, and he says that there are 15 to 50 errors in every 1,000 lines of code. Now, that doesn't mean there's 15 to 50 vulnerabilities, but you can extrapolate that in some fashion and know that in all of the lines of code in a Chevy Volt, there's going to be some vulnerabilities in there. So has anybody seen this? This is a company, they were actually founded in 2011, but they just put this out. It's a Linux-powered rifle. It comes with an iPad, and it is 100% accurate out to about a mile. You know, it calculates wind, elevation, altitude, distance, everything, and you know, the operator basically pulls the trigger. It's interesting. It's very interesting. It's also a little bit scary when you start thinking about this, putting this kind of technology in the hands of civilians and people that don't have a clue. As we begin to pass more and more personal and business information around through hundreds, thousands, or millions of devices that aren't secure or have inherent vulnerabilities, it provides the perfect storm of opportunity for bad guys to exploit those vulnerabilities, and they're already doing it. In one event last year, hackers broke into over 100,000 everyday household products, things like home routers, multimedia centers, TVs, and at least one refrigerator, according to the report. They turned all of these devices into a huge botnet of compromised computers, and where they then sent more than 750,000 spam and phishing emails to companies and people around the world. Think of this, an Internet of Things botnet. Akamai, some of you know the company Akamai, they found 12,000 to 50,000 devices made up in just one botnet, made up of routers, smart thermostats, smart dryers, and a variety of other Internet of Things devices. For those of you that have been in this business a while, we have a hard enough time defending against computer botnets, zombie botnets. Think about the gazillions of additional devices that we're putting out there, like my watch, that could be part of a IoT botnet. Stay tuned, there's more to come on this one. So let me close with this. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not, or whether you agree with it or not. The Internet of Things is here. It isn't a simple marketing term or new tech buzzword, it's the real deal. I've talked about this Internet of Things in a couple of different events over the past year or so, and a few people always ask me, why in the world do we need this stuff? Why do we need to be connecting everything together? Who the heck needs a digital toilet? Does my refrigerator really need to know and tell me when my milk is low? And my response is this: it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we think. It's here and it's coming and it's growing. We need to accept that, and we need to participate in the future of that. People said the same things about this, about the automobile a century ago. You know, said, we have horses, why do we need these noisy cars? They said the same thing about ballpoint pens. Why do we need these things? We have pencils. They said the same thing about television and the World Wide Web. So I say it again. We have no idea of the great value we'll eventually see out of the Internet of Things. Most of us here today are digital immigrants, while our children and grandchildren are digital natives who have never known a time without computers or without the Internet. In 20 years, the next generation will be the Internet of Things natives, and they will grow up in a world where they don't remember a time without everything being connected all the time. And we can't afford to be Luddites standing on the sidelines watching this happen. In fact, and this is an important point, I think we'll soon be asking why things aren't connected to the Internet rather than think why they are connected to the Internet. Think about that. Today, we still ask that. Why are we connecting these things? 5 years from now, it's going to be, well, why isn't that connected to the Internet? So while there's certainly challenges ahead, it's also an incredibly exciting time that we have the opportunity to design the next generation of things that will work well together, that are secure, and that protect our privacy along the way. I read somewhere the other day that only 40% of companies that exist today will exist in any meaningful way in 10 years. Wow, that's pretty important. It means that for many of you here today, you need to think about your military service, your government organization, or your private company. How are you going to deal with this kind of disruption? It also means a lot of opportunity for fresh thinking. It's said that you can recover from a poor decision, but you can't recover from indecision. Now's the time for us to make decisions about the Internet of Things so that we aren't standing around in a few years wondering why we have an infrastructure that's so insecure we're afraid to use it. Some people are predicting the death of the Internet, and I'm not really sure about that, but I am sure that we're going to see a different Internet in a couple of years than what we see today. What's it going to look like? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows, but I know that if you're an entrepreneur, it's a target-rich environment. As General Chesty Puller famously said, we're surrounded. This simplifies the problem. And that's what our Internet of Things are like. You can aim in any direction and hit a problem dying to be fixed. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful conference, and I have plenty of time for questions if we have any. Are we good, Dean?
We have a couple microphone handlers in the back, so if you do have a question for Mr. Weatherford, if you could just raise your hand, or even better, stand up, and we will get you a microphone so you can be heard.
Dean asked me if there were any questions I wouldn't take, and I said no, I don't. I've spent time on Capitol Hill. I don't think there's anything you could ask me that would embarrass me or scare me too much. Right, Harry? Nothing? Well, great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Weatherford, on behalf of the Rocky Mountain chapter of AFCEA, we thank you for your expertise. We thank you for your knowledge, but most of all, we thank you for your time, sir. and we want to present you with a coin to say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to head towards our luncheon, and we will be starting that very promptly right at 12 o'clock today. So if you have paid for lunch and you have a ticket for lunch, make your way down to the International Hall. Our lunch today is sponsored by Lockheed Martin and Deloitte & Touche, and our guest speaker, of course, as mentioned before, is the Director of DISA, Lieutenant General Ronnie Hawkins. Thank you very much, and we'll see you back at lunch.